Are you a sex worker looking to build a new website or a website redesign? Then you'll want to consider Fox Digital. They did a fantastic job designing my website, Stripped by Sia. If you want your website done, mention that you're a listener of the show at foxdigital.design for 20% off. Tell them I sent ya. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Stripped by Sia, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between, including myself. Hello and welcome to the show. If it's your first time listening here, welcome to season 6. This show is all about destigmatizing sex work because a lot of the industry is highly judged. Lots of preconceived notions, assumptions made about us and our industry. And this show is dedicated to kind of demything and debusting all of those stereotypes that we're often slapped with. And I do that by bringing different guests onto the show every single week to share a little bit about their corner of the sex industry. So this week is no different than other weeks. Of course, I'm bringing on a wonderful person in the industry that's doing really freaking cool, amazing things that we will get into. But as you know, if you are a listener of the show, we have to go through all the things. So if you want to skip ahead 5 minutes, I just got to thank all the people that need to be thanked and do all that stuff. So first of all, introducing myself. My name is Steph Sia. I am the host of the show. I do all the things. I record, I find the people, I edit all the things. I am a one-woman show, and I am myself a sex worker. So I am a digital content creator. I am also a stripper based in Vancouver, Canada, and I was a former sugar baby for a number of years on a seeking arrangement for a long time. And yeah, I have a lot of peers in the industry, and of course, I just feel like a lot of us are very, very misunderstood, which is why I chose to do this show many years ago. And I just want to go ahead and first of all, thank all the lovely Patreon subscribers. You all know I do this by myself. So your financial support is greatly appreciated. It's helping me fund my trip to XBiz next week in Miami, which is really exciting. It's my first big industry event, which is one scary, two anxiety inducing, but also really exciting. I'm really happy to be there. Patreon subscribers, thank you again. There are different subscriptions there. If you're interested in supporting the show monetarily, you can do that by going to patreon.com/strippedbysia. Subscriptions starting as low as $4. There's lots of really cool goodies you can get, like the full exclusive video content that is only available on there, plus a ton of bonus episodes. I will be doing some behind the scenes bonus episodes for XBiz, so stay tuned for that. That should be out in June or something, or whenever I'm going to have time again to do my bonus episodes. And it's just a really cool way to kind of preview the guests that are going to be on the show. So I kind of like to throw that out to you guys first to be like, hey, I'm bringing this person on the show, ask your questions right away, and kind of get a preview on that. So be sure to check it out. Again, it's patreon.com/strippedbysia. And I just want to do a quick shout out to those who are on the top tier. Hello, my friends from Germany, Snoo. We've got Vancouver, Canada, Aruba Sarkar. We've got Jay Sunstern. Hello. We've got our American peoples. We got Justin Erickson, Ted McGuire, Guy or Geyser. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. And Selena Money. Thank you so much for being on the top tier of the show. You get a fun little fan recognition shout out on the show for every single episode. Thank you. Also, big thank you to my network, SkyhawkAfterDarkTV.com. It is an adult industry network that hosts a lot of podcasts like mine, videocasts as well. So if you do enjoy similar content to this, be sure to check it out. It's SkyhawkAfterDarkTV.com if you're interested in supporting your other adult industry people there, and also just learning more about the shows that they produce. And last but not least, would like to thank the person who made my website, Fox Digital. I don't know how to do anything to do with websites. I mean, I know a little bit, but not enough to build a whole website from scratch. So my friend Anthony from Fox Digital made my site for me. And he did it at a very decent cost, which is really, really great. And for Stripped by Sia listeners, he is giving everyone 20% off websites. So if you want to go ahead and check it out, whether you have an existing website, whether you want to kind of start to get into the digital sphere of the internet, be sure to check him out. It's foxdigital.design. Tell him I sent you and get 20% off. Okay, so enough of that. Hello and welcome back for those who have skipped that first 5 minutes. That's totally cool. I am not offended. I'm really excited to bring on today's guest because there are 3 topics that I love and also position my podcast on as well, which is totally in alignment with this guest. We're talking about decriminalization, specifically a decriminalization bill that is currently in the works in Vermont, which is really exciting. We're also talking about humanization of sex workers, which you've definitely heard me chat on the show as well about. And of course, the power of education, which is, again, this is a free resource for anyone to listen to, for anyone to obtain, because I really don't believe in gatekeeping information. So I'm really excited to bring Misha Montana onto the show today. If you are not familiar with who Misha Montana is, she's a multi-award-winning adult performer and director, an advocate for humanizing the adult industry, an ambassador and educator at the Porn Conversation. I think also a hardcore wrestler, a stroke survivor. Check. So many things down the list. I can probably name more, but that is what I could find on the internet. So please welcome to the show, Misha Montana.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, Steph. This is so exciting. I have wanted to do this for a long time, and I love getting the opportunity to work with like-minded individuals like yourself. So I think this is going to be a great conversation. I'm really excited. So thank you for that introduction.
Yay! I hyped you up. I'm your hype girl. I try my best.
I got you, girl.
So Misha, I mean, I have done a little bit of sleuthing around on the internet, trying to find out who you are. You reached out to me and I was like, this person is freaking cool. Of course I would love to have you on the show. Hell's fucking yes. But I, again, gathered the things that I think I know about you. I would like for you to maybe introduce yourself and bring your own introduction to the table here and maybe have your own description of who you think you are.
Sure. I mean, you nailed it pretty close, but it's I am a adult performer. I'm the only female director at a company called Alterotic, where I also mentor. I'm the chief brand officer for that company, as well as their production manager, and again, only female director there. I am an ambassador and educator for this wonderful nonprofit called the Porn Conversation, which we will be jumping into, which I'm super excited about. I was in wrestling promotion for a long time. Wrestling is definitely deep in my family and life currently, and has been. So I'm multifaceted. I'm a stroke survivor. I do advocate for stroke awareness and education, but humanizing the adult industry has always been the biggest, most important thing to me. That's a topic near and dear to my heart, and I've kind of used my stroke and different incidents and occurrences in my life to try to make that an example of humanizing ourselves to the world. So that's my goal and my mission, and I'm super excited and happy to be talking about that stuff. And decrim is huge, and I have a political background, so being heavily involved in politics for a long time, and then now getting the opportunity to kind of work hand in hand with some heavy hitters that are hopefully going to change the game for a lot of people. So I'm very excited about what's going on. Super excited.
Yeah, and we're excited to hear all about that. And I am just ready to dive with both feet in. But before we get to all the good stuff, we need to hear some equally good stuff as well. And I know my audience is always well, tell us about how she got started in the industry. What's your story there? What is your kind of entry point into the adult industry?
So I actually started in the adult industry many years ago, like 10 or so years ago. And I started more on the modeling side, the fetish, BDSM kind of modeling. And then kind of had one toe in, one toe out of the adult industry. I went to college. I had all these, normal jobs in between, and I just never was really satisfied. I kept denying that that urge in me and that identity that I was split on for so long. And I knew it was such a large part of me, but then I kind of tried to like compress it and try to live a somewhat, normal existence. And when it was 2019, I decided, I'm just going to go all in on joining the adult entertainment industry and commit full time to film. And I knew that that commitment would be a permanent one potentially, right? And that's what I always try to tell people too is like, you know, when you make those decisions, they're very real, especially these days. We have so much, which is a wonderful blessing to have platforms like OnlyFans and all of these different, content platforms available for creators. But it is a double-edged sword when you commit to these platforms, you're putting your content out there. It is no different than you being in industry porn. And there's a weird, misconception with that somehow that OnlyFans is more tolerated by society or because it's more trendy and there's celebrities that are engaging on it. And that's a very dangerous misconception because once you commit to sex work, you are in sex work. That stigma applies to all of us equally. And I that caution people, not deter them, but caution to like really think about like what's something that you're going to be losing by potentially engaging in this kind of work. I wish that wasn't the case as you do, and we're working as hard as we can to try to change that and just to flip the narrative and educate people more so that this stigma doesn't exist and endanger us. But unfortunately, that's the reality that we live in. So, I think that when I joined, it was a huge decision to make, and I'm glad that it took me as long as it did. I was older when I got in, and it's the best decision I ever made. And I don't regret it at all. But I'll tell you, as I'm sure you know too, the consequences of sex work are very real. So as much as it's wonderful and like I wouldn't change it for the world, it's still, there are things about it that you have to just be accepting of in the meantime until we can get it changed.
Yes, and hopefully we can get it changed as well with the work that you're doing, which we'll talk about very soon. But those are some really great points to start off this conversation, though, too, to especially the permanency of your decisions, basically, of you choosing to get into this line of work. Because like a lot of the times, and especially when I got into the industry also around a decade ago too, as a sugar baby, I was still like a little bit older, quote unquote older, getting into the industry because I was like, I'm gonna try to do a little bit of research, sort of, kind of, to try to be responsible getting into this. And I was like 24-ish when I got into the industry as a sugar baby. And even when I did, I was still like clueless. Like I look back at those decisions I made and it was still freaking clueless compared to the knowledge I have now. And even with like when I started dancing back in 2018, but I was like doing a lot of amateur nights for like 2 years because I like wasn't sure if I wanted to commit or not. I was just like, trying to be calculative and also understand like, okay, like I do work an office job. Am I okay if my coworkers find out about this? And what would those potential consequences be? Would my work be okay with this? Would I potentially get fired? What about the repercussions if someone outs me? Like, are those going to sever certain relationships and stuff like that? So there really is a lot to consider. And like, I know I've briefly spoken about this too, but like, there's so much like sensationalization and glamorization around our industry. And it's not just all about the purses and the vacations and the lifestyles and the money and all that stuff too. Like this is, at the end of the day, it's a job. It's work, and you got to put the work into it. Right. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
And it's difficult work. I think that's the thing too, that, which is a little bit unfortunate about, this mainstreaming of sex work is that it makes it look like it's easy and obtainable, like with minimal effort. And and someone pointed this out the other day, and I was thinking about it too, and I believe it to be correct. Is like statistically, like take your OnlyFans percentages. If you're in the top 25%, meaning the bottom 75%, makes less than $100 a month. on OnlyFans. Okay. Put that into perspective. You know what I mean? So the vast majority of people, even on a platform where you can potentially, remain more anonymous and, have a little bit more privacy, which I, in my mind, think that that's just a totally false expectation.
Yeah.
I don't think that's possible. And even if it is for a little while, like the eventuality of like being exposed in some level is going to happen. And that's absolutely wrong. Like I don't understand why, consensual sex work as adults, as consent giving adults, that we have to censor ourselves, especially in an industry that is consumed by a vast majority of the population, most of whom hypocritically, argue against our existence.
Yeah.
So there's
Oh
that.
my gosh. Yes, I know. I agree on so many levels here. And like, I feel like our work is, yeah, as mentioned before, just not understood a lot, and gets conflated with trafficking, with being exploited and stuff too. And we'll talk about that as that comes into conversation during the next hour and stuff too. But I'm just really eager to start talking about the decrim bill that you're kind of working on with lobbyist David Mickenberg. That I was also hoping to have like a joint episode with both you two on the show, but like I just like trying to schedule with so many people. I'm like, it's giving me anxiety. So I'm like, I can't. I just can't.
No, I get it. When like if it eventually out too, like, and David's a busy man, bless his heart, doing the work that a lot of people are not capable of putting in, or afraid to, or whatever. He is, he's a wonderful, wonderful human being. And it's interesting with the Vermont bill, because I think it's one of the first times, at least that I've seen, you get this sense of like collective energy with it, where there are a lot of people, and Vermont's small, okay, like we know that it's a very small state. Bernie Sanders comes from Vermont. Like, it does have a more liberal, like, independent ideology for the most part, but a very small state, but a significant one, in the sense that this would be the first state to fully decriminalize sex work, prostitution. And that, setting the precedent for the rest of the nation, would be huge,
Dude.
especially when, this is a wonderful bill in our favor. There are a lot of other ones that are coming from the opposition that would, make criminalization harsher. And there's a lot of that coming out too, in this response to, you know, again, I think, the OnlyFans era generation is not contributing positively to that, because of, different, like, content creators in a lot of ways are not held to the same standards of people in the industry that have to be vigilant with their paperwork and their testing and their identification, properly, getting everything organized. So, I think there's a lot of opportunity for opposition to come in and say, this is reckless, this is dangerous, and we're giving them that on a silver platter. So to have this decrim bill is huge. And it's lovely because, like, even a lot of the law enforcement officials in Vermont support this bill, which
That's
I think
amazing.
says a lot. That says a lot, because
Yeah.
in the high level law enforcement, their state's attorney general is in support of this bill. And in their mind, which is what we all agree with, and we know, statistically this is to be true, is when you decrim, you take away the stigma. You're taking away potentially violent crimes against sex workers. You're taking away the criminalization for clients, against sex workers, again, creating dangerous situations when it's criminalized. So they're also in support of it because it would eliminate trafficking, the
Yes.
need for traffic. That's what people, the opponents, their argument always boils down to several things. The number one thing being child trafficking, or
Right.
it increases sex trafficking, which makes no
Makes
sense. And
sense.
they have no data to support that. It's not true. It's a flat out lie, fear mongering tactics that they use to try to scare people, because somebody that hears, oh my God, there's trafficking, there's not one single person in the world other than the traffickers themselves that would support trafficking. Like any normal person in the world doesn't support that. So of
Right.
course it's an easy thing to trigger everybody to just bring up trafficking. No problem.
Right.
And then you have the organizations like in COSI and all these, different places that operate under like this more liberal progressive agenda when they're really like under the guise of that when they're actually just, staunch conservative cutthroat like Republicans that are trying to eliminate sex work, period. So
Right.
rights, trans rights, anybody's rights other than, what they see fit in their own moral like coding. So this is huge. I'm excited about it. I think like the support from multiple agencies, the House and the legislature, or excuse me, the House and the Senate are both pulling people together on this. It's a great bill, getting a lot of attention.
Yeah.
So as it should.
Yeah.
So I think it's great. I'm curious to see. It just was announced several weeks ago. As far as I've seen, there's a lot of positive reception to it. There's some great organizations in Vermont that are backing this, and I really think it was well done enough to make. Hopefully, it'll make it through, and it will set the precedent, like someone said, for the rest of the nation. You
Yeah.
know, and even just to have one win would be nice change. So
Yeah, totally. I agree with you on that one for sure. Like this is super exciting and also just really cool that it's again coming out of such a small state, but it sounds like a lot of people are really interested in backing and supporting this, which is awesome and something you mentioned law enforcement too, like not we never even hear about that. We're always like law enforcement's like never on our side ever. So that's huge.
shocking.
Yeah. My jaw like literally dropped when he said that. I was like, "What?"
I, I was when I heard him, I was like, "That's awesome." That because that's a huge deal, and usually, the law enforcement, especially for like sex work, it's very, on the more conservative side of things too. Like, and don't get me wrong, like the conservatives absolutely hate this bill for the most part. Like, of course, like I don't think there are many conservatives that are in support of this bill, but I think uh, opening up the conversation and then showing the evidence, presenting these facts, like this is how we get things done, and the only way we're going to is to try. And I think this has the potential to literally change so much for consensual sex work in this country and globally potentially too. So I think it's great. It's a wonderful thing. I'm very happy to be in the background. So it's exciting.
Yeah, and for those who are listening, because I also acknowledge that not everyone's American. I know most of you are American listeners out there, but to give some people some context too, I was doing a bit of research on this too because I was like, "This is awesome! This is so progressive." This basically started, and I actually don't even know when this kind of started or came into effect. But yeah, basically, lobbyist David Mickenberg is kind of like fighting to delete a sentence in the city charter, and it currently states to restrain and suppress houses of ill fame and disorderly houses, and to punish common prostitutes and persons consorting therewith. Basically, and this, as you mentioned, this will basically decriminalize sex work if we are amending that. Do you know when this kind of started, like when David started working on this, and and how did you get involved too? Like, I'm also curious to hear about that.
It's weird because I feel like things happen like so serendipitously, like where we all operate, which I was kind of trying to explain to him too, is we all have little pockets around the country of like different things that we do, which I like. I love the work that we all put in. I wish in sex work we had more cohesion. Like if there was like just like one organization that we all subscribed to, that we all could contribute to, and like that was the one,
Yeah.
where there are many like small pockets of people that are doing work kind of independently, fabulous, but
Mhm.
it's like, and then we kind of like connect with each other like around the country and around the world, and I've been networked into that little loop where I was approached by a good friend of mine who has her ear to the ground on all kinds of different things and knows, my political involvement, my advocacy is always very aggressive. So I am most of the time the speak on behalf of a lot of different things that people wouldn't be otherwise like comfortable speaking on. So I was approached by my friend to reach out and talk to David and get with that. But in my capacity, I am trying to contribute the knowledge that I have from being a sex worker. Vermont, which was explained to me, if it was any other state, I would probably have more of a public involvement in it,
Mhm.
because Vermont's very small. It's a very
Right.
tight knit community. They're not overly appreciative of like outside involvement, which I respect.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of like operating from the outside and just trying to contribute as much positive information and knowledge that I have from the outside, as well as try to, again, get more awareness to this subject, to this bill. I'm trying to then, we'll see how this goes, but I am going to try to duplicate, mimic this bill and try to push it to other states as well.
Ooh,
So, if we can follow this trend, then I'd like to be involved in more of a national like push for it as well. So,
amazing.
using it as an example, and it's wonderful. So there's a lot of great work that's being done. My capacity at the moment is more behind the scenes on this particular project, but I will be more publicly involved in a few other different things coming up here. So it's exciting
Yeah,
things that are happening, and
very.
I'm happy to be involved in any way. If we can just make it happen, like that's a win, you
Where I'm
know.
here for that.
Yeah,
I
root
like.
for it. Like,
I wonder if, like, to your knowledge, if you know, like, is the state of Vermont, or is David working with any nonprofit organizations there in Vermont that help benefit sex workers? I don't even know. I'm not even familiar with what organizations are even out there.
there are there are several in Vermont, and the one big one is like totally slipping my mind at the moment, which I should have like written it down. But there are great organizations up there that are fully made up of local sex workers.
Awesome.
That organization is actually the local organization is who started this idea. Their leader in their community, they got together, they went and did, the stumping to try to get this accomplished, which is really how, we have to do it.
Yeah.
um, the groundwork in, like, and if we can, effective organization, it's beautiful to see what happens when we can actually organize and then get it done. So they
Yeah.
went out, started approaching different politically connected individuals, and um, got a lot of different people in the Senate and the House that are very passionate about this. I think that's a big issue too, is finding, lawmakers that are actually like passionate about this too.
Yes.
And like I previously, their attorney general is extremely supportive of this as well. So there's a lot of positive energy, and I think it's powerful too.
Hmm.
With the amount of people, clearly it's like there's such an intense stigma around just even the thought, or the breath of like sex work, where people are very hesitant almost immediately to shy away from discussing it or being open and receptive to hearing about it.
Absolutely.
And I think what people, the argument always is like, why do we care about this?
Hmm.
How does this affect me if I'm not, you know, engaging and actively like paying for sex, then why do I care about this? So I think that's where, there's a critical element that has to be involved in these situations, is education.
Yes.
You know,
Absolutely.
is the component that kind of glues all of these things together, because you can put in all this work and like you get people that are like-minded, that are passionate about it, that are eager to see change, and yet you have this, the opposition that's very good at spinning a totally different picture. So education is critically important to bridging the gap and to trying to get people to understand why this is important, why it affects everyone, and it's a human rights issue.
Yes.
I mean, this is seriously a human rights issue. So it's a women's rights issue. It's a
Yes.
gay rights issue. But
Yes.
it's a human. At the end of the day, no matter who you are, this is a human issue. It's a human right. So, and I think decrim is so important to try to eliminate, this violence against sex workers, and at the very least, client relationships,
Yes.
um, eliminating the danger in those situations, or like even just the need to be secretive, because all of this suppression is where predatory type behavior comes from.
And
You
violence
know,
is
violent.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like it's crazy. So there are a lot of different reasons why it's important, but first and foremost, like I think eliminating this violence, having more tolerance, like who wouldn't benefit from being in a safer, more tolerant society?
Right.
We all could, whether you agree with it or not. And we're all human beings at the end of the day that are entitled to have a life that is secure. So
Yeah. So many good points there, and I'm really I'll touch on this before we head into the humanization topic. That's also another topic I'm really excited to chat to with you about. But it's really amazing that the organization, which I will find out and put in the show notes below, so people can.
yeah, I'm gonna scream for not that, and I'm just like, at my mind, I have like my stroke brain can only process so much information at a time where I'm like, yeah, I didn't have notes out and should have had notes. I try not to because it tests me, and like I know what it is, and I'm like, I just
It's just at the tip of your tongue, and we will give them credit. They will be in the show notes below. We're gonna shout them out once we find that out. I'm sorry we don't have this information for you at hand, but I think that's really amazing that they were able to, start approaching like different lobbyists and other political groups and to actually gain traction, because we're also fighting something similar up here in Canada where I'm based. We're also challenging one of the charter rights and freedoms, also a human rights issue as well, too. But the problem is finding someone who will help carry this through, and that's always been the problem. And of course, without that, it'll take much, much, much longer to even get our voices heard. So like huge. And again, we will find the name of that organization. We are so sorry. I just did not do my research on that.
not completely. I'm sorry.
I'm also
Like my brain. Wow, that's great. Like, yeah. If I was, to be fair, if I was speaking in a more formal setting, I would have my notes with me on everything.
it's all good. It's totally chill here.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? I'll just like look it up. I'll figure it out. I'll post it. Send it to you. David's gonna kill me, but it's this stuff that's happening, and that's what, like when you said with Canada too, like trying to get somebody who cares, is the biggest thing, like, or that they're willing to like fall on the sword for this cause, because it's controversial,
Very.
not an easy topic, it shouldn't be. It's very simple if you like look at it as a, just a basic human issue, and that among other things, it's the most largely consumed product in the world,
Yeah.
So those things, like, it should be so simple, and it's not. Unfortunately, there's a lot more that goes into it, and we all know, the game of politics is tricky.
Yes.
So being able to finesse that and getting individuals like David and others that are, no nonsense, and they're not afraid to stump for it is wonderful. And like, again, I hope that this can make it through, therefore setting a tone, and an example to show that this is possible.
Right.
Then might be more likely to adapt and follow suit. So I'm hoping that's the case, and that we can get it on a national level, international level as well. So,
Yeah. To
and
set the precedent for sure.
if the law is amended, And keep in mind too, like a lot of these laws like this one, it's over 100 years old.
Yeah,
You
super
know,
archaic.
it's never been visited in the last 100 years. So, which is interesting too, that there's so many like anti-prostitution laws. When you'd think like 100 years ago, it would seem more likely that it was legal. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you'd think, but but we're moving, I think we are moving towards a more progressive eh, ideological society where those things will be possible. I believe that. Like, I really think we are trending in that way. And I think, especially the younger generations are motivated. They're
Yes.
very progressive. Um, I think there will be an ideological shift here. And I mean, the sooner the better. It should have happened yesterday.
Yeah.
But we can make it happen and just lay the groundwork and have a bunch of these really excited, passionate younger people coming out and supporting this stuff, like, then it's a win. A win is a win.
Definitely.
So,
I'm with you on that one. You mentioned earlier too, again, the topic of humanization, which I think is so important to talk about because, and this is a human rights issue for sure. But in the end of the day, like we are all human, and I'm really sick and tired of people thinking that we're not, or we're just some kind of sex doll, or we don't have feelings, we don't have families, we don't have relationships. I just love to hear your thoughts. And we don't have health problems, all of this stuff. I would love to hear because I know you're a huge, huge advocate for humanization in this space. I this.
absolutely. This is the biggest thing to me. And like, this goes hand in hand with, decriminalization. Like, this is the whole reason why we want decriminalization, because we are human.
Yes.
And I think again that boils down to like the missing component in a lot of this stuff is just education. It's a lack of education
Mhm.
because people are uncomfortable, you know, acknowledging referencing sex, and especially like in younger ages, like educating the youth.
Mhm.
Very, very sensitive subject. So, with humanizing, it's when I got into the industry, even before I had my stroke, that's always been kind of my mission, because I came from a background that I know, I was privileged in this sense, like, and I would never try to pretend like I wasn't. I know a lot of people did not have the same like path as I did, but I chose this over other things that I could have chosen to do. Like, I, could have gone to law school. I was going to, I was in politics. That was a direction I wanted to go. And instead, I wanted this life, like I wanted to be a part of it. But in my mind, I wasn't ignorant to the fact of just how damaging it potentially could be. And like we talked about, how permanent. And, then I realized, like, very quickly, more quickly than I had anticipated, you know, you kind of foolishly think that like you're immune to this stigma. Like, you're like, oh, people know me. They'll accept me for my choices and who I am. They'll understand. They won't use this as a tool, weaponize it against me. And wrong.
Yeah. Very
Like,
wrong.
very, very wrong. Like, my father is an attorney. Within the first few months in my journey, had a, disgruntled ex send a bunch of things,
Oh
to
no.
him, this, and it's just like, not only is it like mortifying, it's like and emotionally, like, it's emotional terrorism to me. Like,
Yeah.
it should be criminal. Like, and that's what I don't understand, is how, we're human beings, and like, for some reason, we're the easiest to target, and
Hmm.
then it's so easy to weaponize our work against us in a wrongful way,
Yeah.
without justification, without merit. And we have no protection.
Yes.
That's what's so wrong. Like, how is someone entitled to harass us incessantly, or, to expose us to criminal charges, or, these false allegations that they can weaponize easily because of what we do for work?
Right.
How is that societally acceptable, and how is that like judicially like protected? Like, how are those people enabled and protected to do those things to other humans. Like, and that's part of
Yeah.
humanizing, where the reason why we suffer so much too, like mental illness,
Mhm.
stress, anxiety, all of these different, things that like that are unique to our line of work, or at least more, they're magnified more so in our industry because of like our existence, just even to live is threatened constantly. We just walking down the street, especially as a street sex worker, strippers,
Yeah.
like prostitutes, escorts, like the most dangerous line of sex work that you could be
Yeah.
in. And,
Absolutely.
even recognizable in the adult industry, dangerous under
Yeah.
the right circumstances, especially being identifiable and because of that line of work. So, humanizing is so important to me because it's like, and watching people just like, and myself included, what we've experienced and gone through, and it's horrific.
It
It's
is.
wrong. And we should be going out more, and like, and all it takes really too is like just having conversations where you show people like, I am a human being. I'm a mother, I'm someone's daughter, I'm someone's partner, I am a friend, I am this, and I have these interests and I have these capabilities, and I am a human being that's entitled to have a life.
Yeah.
And that's all we can do, is to try to go out and just rewrite that narrative and eliminate that stigma. So we're all humans at the end of the day. So
Yeah. Amen to that. I mean, it's so frustrating. Like, just like the stories that we hear, that even like not just on Twitter or whatever, but even like in my real life with my real clients and stuff here, like just hearing this stuff, like for example, this past weekend, and I'm going to just share this on the podcast now, even though it's embarrassing, but I've already gotten over it. So basically, I was working at the club. I met someone there. Big CEO, has many different companies there, wanted to take me out of the club, to go to his office, do some full contact, like private dances and stuff. And I was like, sure. He's like, I'm going to buy you out. I'm going to pay you this much money for that. It's like, perfect. But I still have obligations to go to do my shows at the club because I'm contractually obligated for that. I get paid for those shows. It's like a feature dancer thing. But anyways, the stupid guy, like, of course, basically didn't pay me, and I didn't secure the payment before I had to go run back to the club to do my show. And he's like, the e-transfer is going through. And I'm like, I never received it, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, I'm having to chase this guy for the next few days. Totally ghosted me. It was like a lot of money. Like I was supposed to work that entire night. I have to sell dances, and that whole day was gone. So like I was out like $1,000 at least. So it was just heartbreaking to me, embarrassing that this can still happen to me, even though I've been in the industry for like 10 years and I'm still getting like fucked over by dudes like this. And for dudes like this that think that they can get things for free and don't believe that this is a job and like they can get that stuff just because they can.
they can. And that's the problem right there. I think, one, that's just horrific, and I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And it sucks because that's not a surprising
It's not
situation, or
surprising. Totally.
yeah, that's because then, I've heard so many situations identical to that, because these guys too, like, they know they're protected because of the criminal element.
Hmm.
Even though I like to, like, my thing is like, you should never be afraid or like let somebody intimidate you. I mean, obviously, there are dangerous people out there that will threaten you physically, and they will hurt you, they will kill you. That's a real thing.
Yes.
Because of you is less than, and so does society. So therefore, they are like enabled to engage in those kind of problematic behaviors because they're enabled by society to do so.
Hmm.
But I think in a situation like that, it's like, if somebody's like that high profile, then maybe you make a call to their office, you know?
Oh, I
But
know. Trust me,
but
I got some things up my sleeve.
that's the thing is, though, at that point is like, is it worth your life? Because when you start doing, like, I have friends that, like, no problem, they would call their wife, like,
Yeah.
no problem. and like bold, but it's also like, to me, you kind of have to weigh out, like, is money worth, like, when you start playing with people's lives too, like, you don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly.
And so it's like worth it at the end of the day. Like, I'm all for like exposing these pieces of shit, for being what they are.
Me
Honestly,
too.
if someone would. But like that, so like, you know, I'm all for it. But at the end of the day, it's like, again, we're not living in a world that is in our favor
Yeah.
yet.
Yes.
And as much as we're like women and should be protected from, dangerous predatorial type behavior, you'd think that the law would protect us from people like that.
Right.
But, unfortunately, but that also, like, I think having laws in place that will make it so that people like that can't get away with it, because it would be decriminalized.
Yeah.
Then you're on an equal playing field, then you can't leverage your power and authority, this false sense of power and authority you think you have over me, being, the worker in this situation, you being a client that's in a privileged position.
Right.
So, I think that's why it's important too. And that might mean anything to anybody, but it means a lot to us, because that's huge. You eliminate all kinds of problematic things just from that right there. So
Absolutely. And this is why it's so needed to have that decriminalization bill in place. So we actually have rights.
we do. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, and that's the first step, which is wild to me too.
I
Like,
know.
and a human being, and that's the first step you have to take, is to decriminalize. Like, and then I think there was a part in that law too where, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, I believe I'm correct in this, that they're in Vermont, they were still allowing police officers to like engage in like sexual acts, like to catch people in
Oh,
prostitution
what?
situations. There was something to that, like, and I might be wrong, but there was a discussion about that at some point that I remember having, where I was like, "How is that still like?" And it
Is
might
that
not even
allowed?
those type of laws are still, those practices still exist in law enforcement agencies, like various law enforcement agencies. So it's like,
Jesus.
but like, how is it a thing? But once we can lay the groundwork, this is a huge first step, then you can start honing in on more specific. Like, I'm actually trying to work on right now, because I've been, and I'm sure you will agree with this too. I've been a victim of this over especially the last like 9 months. Um, Cyber harassment,
Yeah.
bullying, exposure, stalking. I've
Yes.
had police have been called on me. Child endangerment, false reports of child endangerment, when
Oh,
I wasn't even in the state that they called in. Like, I
what?
have multiple residences, so
Yeah.
um, and it's targeted. It's a vengeful thing. I was doxxed by someone in the industry that
Oh,
was in a position of power that just railed me, into this. It's awful. Like, the stuff that we go through, that I don't talk about it like often, where it's like, because I don't see the point, when it's like, you try to like, I've learned that it's like, you try to just like live your life and exist and do you, and they'll go away.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
wish that were the case, but it's like, it's so easy for these people to weaponize what we do for a living against us.
Yeah.
And so and that's what, like, I'm trying to work on, some, because I was trying to figure out, like, why can't I sue them for harassment, or
Mm-hmm.
especially when they're filing false reports,
Right.
but they're loopholing it. It's like, if you call anonymously, then there's no report, so therefore it's not a false report, even though they're wasting taxpayer dollars maliciously, and as a form of vengeance and harassment. There's nothing we can do about that.
That's
Perfect.
so
So it's
fucked
like,
up.
it's horror, and it has like
Yes.
real, like, emotional, psychological, like, damage,
Right.
and as well. Like, you can go on the internet and make fake accounts and troll and and make heinous allegations and
Mhm.
say whatever you want about someone with no proof, no evidence, no merit. And it's like, other than like, you're just, people have weaponized the internet. So, I'd like to work on something similar with that, because I know that we get targeted more often than not, and a lot more often. But I think that's something that might be easier to like digest by society, because like a lot of the cyberbullying stuff, is huge, like just all the way across the board, like
Totally.
kids,
Yeah.
any anybody at this point is like the victim of cyberbullying. So, if we legislation to protect us from that, or criminalize it, like criminalize false allegations that people make on the internet, or like weaponize things against specifically sex workers, but anyone.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm working on. There's all kinds of exciting things. Hopefully it'll, you just
Oh,
have to turn
good.
bad into something good.
Yeah.
There's
I
all,
love that. I love that approach.
I do too. Like I whenever something bad happens, if you can take it and turn it into something positive and something meaningful and inspirational, or then that's what's important. That's what life is about.
Exactly.
Try to
Oh.
operate.
I do also, I mean, I love this conversation, but I'm also really curious about your work with the porn conversation as well, the education piece, because like I think that's so interesting. I actually, I'm a marketing consultant for a big sexual health educator in Canada, and we work with kids as well, and also talk to them about media literacy and porn, and try to educate them as well at a young age, because it's really important to do that, and a lot of people don't have that proper education. So I'm curious, and also just really interested in hearing about this piece as well.
Thank you. Yeah, organization is wonderful. Nonprofit organization created by Erica Luss, who's wonderful, and it started with really promoting education to different, education levels, like of children, teens, adults, anyone that is, in need of education. Because what I've noticed too, it's not just, people think that when you're trying to educate about sex, it's, targeting a younger audience. The reason that's necessary is because it hasn't been instilled in people now that are adults that don't know anything
Yeah.
about their sexual health, about even like, I mean, simple like consent practices, like, and even, like masturbation, all these different things, these components that like healthy components of who we are biologically as human beings. Like, we're all products of sex. We
Right.
all will have sex, most of 99% of us, I imagine, at some point in our lives. We
Yes.
are sexual beings. And, when you attach, like, when you're trying to sexualize it to children, that's what people have a problem with. But we're not
Right.
sexualizing it. The fact that you are
Yeah.
sexualizing it, what's
That's the
odd.
problem. Yes.
That's the
Thank you.
like, and that's, people are all the time like, well, why would, I want my children to learn from somebody like you. It's like, why would you not? Because, you who is an expert in my field, who has the life experience, knowledge, and has been through these situations, I can tell you what not to do, or things that I've done that maybe you should do differently. And not having, like, even coming into the adult industry, you don't have a clue when
Yeah.
you get into the industry. I didn't have a clue, and I was older, and I was like, I had no idea about some of this stuff that you should, like, I mean, you'd think you would just know, but how would you? You
Right.
know, I had a pretty high level of knowledge. Imagine having nothing.
Yeah.
So, and that's just on the working side of things. If, that's where, like, having education for sex workers, like, that are trying to be involved in sex work, that's a whole component. But, I think it's so critically important to teach children and, young adults safety.
Yeah.
Safety is, like, you
So
know, they, we're in an epidemic of STDs. And, they're not learning sex from us. They're learning sex from, the internet, their peers, their music, their movies, their video games. Like there are so like mainstream media is way more accessible and
Totally.
sexual than porn is. Like you have to be actively seeking out explicit images. Not saying that it's not easily attainable, but then why is it that the internet is teaching your children about those things?
Yeah.
That's the job of the parents to be teaching their children about these things. They're uncomfortable
Absolutely.
having those, then allow professionals that have the best interest of their children at heart to educate them, to protect them from diseases, from unwanted
Yeah.
pregnancies, from unwanted behaviors, from situations that they may feel pressured to consent to. There's so much hypersexualization in our society, but there's no education. There's just shame and stigma and repression, and those things lead to, like we talked about earlier, predatory behaviors. That's when you
Yeah.
start having it's a malfunction like in people. If you, as a sexual being, are told, you can't masturbate, that's a sin, that's a crime, and you start digesting that, like these are problematic behaviors to try to instill in people.
Mhm.
And though that's where problematic behavior comes from, dangerous behavior. And at the very least, it creates a mental illness too, like unnecessarily. Shame and stigma are some of the most dangerous, weapons that
Yeah.
you use, because it just breeds negativity. So, and having proper education is huge, and I think the whole that society would benefit from that overall, like just in general.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with educating yourself. We could all learn more. So,
Yes, just be a sponge. Seriously. I mean, like,
yeah,
as a person that had a shitty sex education when I was growing up, like, I went to Catholic school, it was like, pop in a video, separate the boys and girls, and this is what your sex education is. And that was it. Like, it was minimal
yeah,
at best, not informative, not engaging. My parents never dared to have that conversation with me either. And
right.
where does that leave kids to learn and gather information? As you mentioned, the internet, their peers, other people that they're exposed to, and stuff like that, which isn't maybe the best places to get their information from. So, really glad to hear about this organization. I think it's super,
Oh,
super
it's
great.
wonderful. Super exciting. Like going to have these conversations, and people are interested in it too. I mean, obviously, like we're all curious beings as well, like, and for people to feel comfortable asking those questions and having those questions answered, like it's always like I always tell people that ask me questions, like this is going to be like a stupid question, or you can tell that they're like embarrassed to ask it. It's like never
Mhm.
be embarrassed to ask something that you don't know.
Yeah.
Like you're trying to expand your knowledge to benefit you, to benefit others, that you can carry that knowledge and wisdom onto and help, again, this is how we change the narrative in our society. It's one at a time. It's having conversations with your friends, with your parents, with your peers, encouraging them to have conversations with others, passing along that information and knowledge that they just learned. That's how you change it. It comes from within. And it's a grueling process, but it's effective. It
Yes.
really is. So, and it's necessary. And, these younger generations, like, I wish it wasn't the case that these kids needed to learn this stuff early on. I have a 6-year-old son. I wish that wasn't the case. Unfortunately, that's reality. So we
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
grow up and deal with it, and understand not encouragement. This is protection. This is education. It's not encouraging children to engage. But if they're in situations, which they will be potentially more likely than not, having the tools, the resources, the knowledge, the confidence to make the appropriate decisions to protect themselves and others.
Yes.
So,
Thank you. You summed that up so beautifully. Like again, it's just preparing your kids for what's to come. And
yeah.
their support and being that trusted adult that they can talk to. So important. So important. I can go on and on about this topic.
Oh, I go all day. I love it.
Misha, there are a few questions that did come in from the audience as well in regards to the decrim stuff. So I feel it's best if we go into that stuff right now, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, of course.
Cool. So these questions came in from Twitter, all three of them. We'll just kind of go right into it. The first one is Vermont is a very beautiful, small, rural state. Oh my God, I said this earlier too. State. How does profession of sex work differ there versus major Northeast cities like Boston or New York?
This is a wonderful question. I, not being a sex worker that is from Vermont, don't know what it would be like to, the difference as far as like somewhere like that's more heavily populated like New York or, Boston, those more like urban areas. I don't know. Coming from sex work in like a rural similar place in Nevada, it's it's very different than like big city work, um just geographically. I mean, I think like, and I don't know if this applies to Vermont, but I think, with technology, sex work has advanced where having access to like clients, you don't actually have to be like, like street corner, like, and you picture like in New York, like old school like prostitutes, which still exist, but like, being on the corner in New York and like at the Bronx, like getting johns off the street. Like, I
Right.
think that it's become more sophisticated, that because of technology, it can be more secretive, and more private, which has its benefits and has its downfalls.
Right.
But I would imagine that it is probably different in Vermont than it is in other cities.
Mhm.
But again, that may be completely wrong. Like, we don't know what, every individual sex worker's experiences with in relation to their clients, in any state. So I think there are similarities always. There are going to be the same issues apply to all of us. I
Yeah.
think that that's a universal fact. But yeah, I think depending on, your area and your region of where, ideologically people are more inclined to be receptive to sex work openly, potentially, you never know. But yeah,
Mhm.
I would imagine it's different, but I don't know, not being a sex worker from Vermont myself. So
Totally.
good question.
This is a good question. And if I were to pitch in too, like the sex workers that I know that go to small rural towns here in British Columbia, I know rates would be dramatically different versus
Yeah.
like larger city. That might be a huge thing. I'm not from Vermont. That I
Good.
know for sure is definitely a fact. So, but again, if anyone's from, usually make an industry safer and more innovative. Feel free to
Yeah.
chime in.
Vermont, chime in. Yeah.
This question is decrim initiatives. Does she think this might increase the number of providers and customers in Vermont?
Absolutely. I think that it would increase the level of clients potentially, but also I think because of that, and people might be afraid of that, that might be like a negative in some people's opinions, but if you're suppressing like your urges and you don't feel comfortable and open enough to like engage in sex work, like even as a client, like there are a lot of people that are deterred from hiring, sex workers because of that stigma on them too. There's all this negative, people usually use that as a negative thing, as like a slur, where it's like, you have to pay for pussy. That's negative to people. You know what I mean? It's slanderous. Like, that's what people, even like as men, as clients, like coming from their perspective, why would people be inclined to engage in sex work if that was the case, for them? So it goes both ways. I think, there's nothing that would be negative about having it fully decrimmed on either side, because then you have protections for both the client and the sex worker. I mean, obviously, I think, it favors sex workers more,
Mm-hmm.
empowers them more, like we talked about, gives us more rights. but it also benefits the client. I think that it would increase the quality
Yeah.
of client. I think
Huge.
that, you know, then if it was open, you have like the ability to contact the police if you're stiffed on, your work, and they wouldn't have this entitlement to feel like they could make you disappear and no one would care. You
Yeah.
know, there are lots of benefits to it. But yeah, I think that the work would go up, but I also think that that would be a positive thing.
Yeah.
I think it'd be for everybody. It'd be mutually beneficial for everyone. People that, may have been interested in sex work before, like, or engaging, hiring escorts, or, whatever they wanted to engage in, that would help have a new healthy outlet for them too.
Right.
So I don't think there are any downfalls to it at all.
Yeah. Great answer to a really great question. Thank you so much. Well, but this question wrote, there's also another good question here too. But also you might have hinted at this earlier as well. Most progressive states, for example, Washington and Colorado, have modernized their laws like regarding cannabis. Do you expect Vermont legislation on sex work decriminalization to be replicated soon in progressive states?
Absolutely. And I think that this is a perfect example of what would potentially be to come. That's why it's so important. Like, and even coming from a small state that might not, ideologically represent the nation as a whole, it still is something. It's leading in the right direction so that other progressive states could potentially follow. That, lawmakers in those states wouldn't be afraid to potentially bring a similar bill forward because it's already been set as a precedent. So I would love to see that happen. I believe that's possible, again, to combat the ultra conservative laws that they're trying to push harsher criminalization. Texas has a very, very harsh increase in criminalization. Um,
Mhm.
and there are other states that could follow that route. So I
Right.
think, having a very significant decrim bill where progressive states and, any state potentially could follow suit, and even if, enough states were to get on board, to enact something on a national level, that would be the dream. That would be the ultimate goal, depending on, which political party is willing to take it on and representing in the majority at the time.
Right.
But I think it's possible. So it's definitely has the potential to be a historical bill, and I hope that people are paying attention to this, and this other states and lawmakers across the country will take note of this and see that it's a very huge issue. And I think adding to that too, one thing is, if we can all get together, like,
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
we could all be together
Right.
and show that this is a serious issue that affects everyone, then I think we could make, significant changes too. So I'm
Totally.
excited to see what's going on. So I'm
Oh
glad
my gosh.
for all the work you do, and, you
Uh,
know, exciting. So I'm happy that we're all a part of this.
Hells yeah. Hells yeah. And I'm really glad to have had you on to speak about this. It's like a huge movement. I'm really hoping it would go through. Do you know what the next steps are at this point before we wrap up this episode? Like, do you know where the bill currently stands?
I don't. It was introduced. Now it's kind of like, the politics game is a waiting game
So
for the
long.
most.
The long
It's
game.
the nature of the beast. The hardest part is done. Now, you'll go through the normal processes with debating, presenting different evidence. They'll be hearing. I don't know if there are currently any hearings scheduled as of now to, present um, in favor opinions and oppositions to it. I'll definitely be tracking it, as I know, like, hopefully you and your listeners will as well too. So it's a great stuff like coming. So we're going to be paying close attention to it. It's out there. It's moving forward. So it hasn't been shot dead in the water yet. Knock on wood, it
Woo,
continues.
yes.
So yeah. Have to go with the process, and that's how this great country works. So.
Yes. Well, fingers crossed. And of course, if there are any updates, we'll go ahead and update the episode, or maybe have to have you back on to kind of share those updates with us.
Yeah, I want to get David on too.
Yes. We'll definitely get David on if we can get our schedules to align. But before I let you go, Misha, where can we all find you?
You can find me on the Safe for Work platforms, Instagram, Twitter at the Misha Montana, and you can find me on onlyfans.com/Misha Montana, as well as my website, mishamontana.com.
Easy peasy. And for everyone else listening at home, it's Stripped by Sia on all podcast platforms. If you're on Apple, feel free to write a review, rate 5 stars. Same thing on Spotify. Would greatly appreciate that. That really helps more people access the show and find the show in terms of visibility. So that all the stuff actually matters. So please go ahead and give an honest review there if you'd like, and an honest rating. And other than that, you can get in contact with me on Twitter and Instagram at Stripped by Sia. Again, patreon.com/Stripped by Sia if you're wanting to support the show financially. And what else? Where can you find me? You can find me at XBiz if you're going to be at XBiz Miami next week. Yeah, I'm so excited.
So that'll be fun.
I'm stoked. I'm really, really excited to get some sunshine and also just network with everyone. So if you're there, please don't be a stranger and come say hi. And hell yes. There we go. And for everyone else listening at home, the episode's every single Sunday, dropping at midnight. Misha, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Thank you so much. And fingers crossed to some progress.
That's right.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.
Talk soon. You're listening to Stripped by Sia, hosted, produced, and edited by Steph Sia. Music by Ted D. Graphic design by Maria Bellandarama, and photography by Ian Davern.